first section that dealt with this whole idea of the Columbo tactic, right, where we're asking questions and helping people work through issues. And now he's going through some kind of real practical, stuff to help folks to help us to see and find flaws in other folks' thinking is really what he's getting at here. And so this first couple chapters here has to do with the idea of contradictions, right? And he says this obviously is one of the biggest flaws, and if we can point this out, the person, we can help them to see that their argument is kind of sinking, right, or isn't a good argument. So in the previous chapter, chapter 11, we looked at a couple of versions of this, and now we want to look at two more versions of this notion of contradiction. He calls them sibling rivalry and infanticide, right? So he says, sometimes a conflict arises when a person raises two objections that are at odds with each other, right? Two objections that are at odds with each other. And he calls this sibling rivalry, right? And he thinks it's pretty easy to spot when people do these kinds of things, right? At other times, someone's view is built on a prior concept that turns out to disqualify the view itself. And he calls this infanticide, right? So we'll kind of take a look at these two notions and see if we can understand exactly what he's getting at here. This is kind of some complicated stuff, so we'll kind of take our time as we work through this. So the first notion here has to do with sibling rivalry, right? What in the world is sibling rivalry? Well, he says occasionally in conversations you notice something odd. You hear a pair of objections voiced by the same person, but the complaints are logically inconsistent with each other, right? So here's two objections, but they kind of, they defeat one another. One defeats, so they're logically inconsistent with each other. He says this is kind of like children fighting, right? And so that's the notion of sibling rivalry. Both objections cannot be simultaneously legitimate, right? And so your task here is to cut the deal in half, right?
Whose toy is this? It's mine. No, it's mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. He said a fair-minded person will surrender at least one of these objections, right, when you identify the problem. Graciously point out the conflict, then ask which one is the real problem, right? And sometimes this move effectively silences both objections because the person that you're talking with realizes that, she's been unreasonable, right? So, for instance, he gives an example here. If homosexuality is morally neutral because it's natural, so notice what makes homosexual okay? Well, because it's natural, so it's morally neutral. Then adoption of children by same-sex couples must be wrong. Why? Well, because for homosexuals, parenthood would be unnatural. So if something is natural makes it okay, then what's unnatural makes it wrong. And since not having children, right? They can't have children would be is a natural state for homosexuals, and so to give them children would be unnatural. So that's kind of the idea here, right? In other words, if nature dictates morality, and the natural consequence for homosexuals is to be childless, then it's unnatural and therefore immoral for homosexuals to raise children. Now, notice the idea here is based on the concept of what makes something moral or immoral, and it's based on nature here, or a natural state, right? And so, wow, right? And so he gives several examples like this to help us to see. The sibling rivalry, these two conflicting arguments, and you can't have it both ways. Right.